All right, everyone. Once again, you see this crowding in the field in the Democratic Party, in the 2020 primaries, between three main liberal candidates, like far left candidates. You've got Bernie Sanders, then you have Harris and Warren. And these three, between the three of them, it's about 35-40% of the Democratic Party. Not everyone that supports them will be the far left. Some of them believe in the electability issue. They look at Biden, maybe they say he's like too old and neoliberal, so they back someone else. Maybe they say Sanders too old. Maybe they're like, well, Kamala Harris is too much of a minority and we're afraid of the business Democrats voting Trump again. Some say, well, Warren can't do it because of the Cherokee thing. And all of these can be made as arguments. But then you look at Biden, he's got like 30% of the vote sewn up right now, although it's going to be interesting to see his numbers post-Hyde Amendment gaffe. This is Biden's problem. He makes stupid mistakes. He loves to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. But we've got to talk about one thing here. Link in the description, archived, of course, to a story where they're talking about sort of the Metoo thing. It looks like people on the further left, there are some elements of them that don't like Bernie Sanders. Now, I don't think it's really ideological. If you like Warren or Kamala Harris, as far as your policies go, you can't possibly dislike Bernie Sanders because the policies are 90% the same. So you'd have to be a fanatic in order to really make a huge differentiation. I think some of it boils down to people saying that it's about electability. It's the electability stupid is the Democratic slogan for this campaign. I think that some of them, not all, but some of the leftists, they look at Sanders and say he's simply too old. He'll be almost 80 on Election Day. He can't campaign hard enough against Trump. He's too open about the fact that he is a socialist. He doesn't do AOC's thing and say social democrat. He uses the term, which is correct, socialist for what he believes in, and has since the 70s. They say, well, he's from, the middle of nowhere, Vermont, which is only half true. As far as the home state advantage, other than maybe crossover votes in New Hampshire, it really doesn't matter. Maybe they prefer a Kamala Harris, someone who they think will do better in urban areas. Maybe they like Warren because they're like, well, she's at least somewhat appealing to moderates because of her past being, so-called moderate. Now she's pretending to be progressive. She's managed to hoodwink 10% of the Democrats into supporting her and thinking that she's some sort of maverick and not an old, life-term politician, basically, who lies about her race. I think Warren's the weakest of the three myself. But they're trying to Me Too Bernie Sanders. Remember some months ago when it was like, well, Sanders had a couple of staffers and they sexually assaulted someone and Sanders didn't come out early and often enough and basically, chastise himself for existing. And what I'm looking at is this. I'm saying Bernie Sanders, as far as I know, has never sexually assaulted anyone. Bernie Sanders, as far as I know, has never raped anyone. I'm not understanding how anyone can legitimately claim that it is Bernie Sanders' unique problem as a politician, that there should be some people working for him who have done bad things. He's got 25,000 volunteers just in the state of Iowa. It is likely that by the end of the campaign, one of them will have committed vehicular homicide. A couple of them will sexually assault people. There'll be some DUIs and jaywalking and traffic fines. Does Bernie Sanders uniquely have to come out and apologize every time somebody who believes in his message happens to screw up? Because I don't hear anybody saying that about the much smaller number of people working for, in some capacity, Kamala Harris. Or Joe Biden. Joe Biden's the one with the Me Too problem. Your front runner is a man who habitually comes up behind young girls, caresses their shoulders creepily, and sniffs their hair and shit like that. I would think that if you're concerned about anyone's hashtag Me Too stuff, as far as the males go, which is part of what this is about, it'd be Biden, not Bernie Sanders. But here's the thing. If you're a Warren fan or a Kamala Harris fan, if you're one of the pink-haired crowd that doesn't like Bernie Sanders for reasons other than his platform, they could be related to color, they could be related to creed or something like that. Probably from that particular perspective, you're looking at Bernie Sanders, and you want to knock him out of the way because, Warren is not going to be able to compete for Biden's votes, but she could grab up Sanders. What they realize is this. Some of these opportunistic legacy media hacks that back the far left, the Voxes and BuzzFeeds and stuff, they're looking at it this way. They're looking at the field and saying, you can have 4 or 5 people in a political race, and it's, even after it's thinned out towards the end, like well after Super Tuesday, there can be 4 or 5 people in the Democratic field because each of them maybe have won a state or come close. They came in second a bunch of places. They hold, and there's no reason for them to drop out. They're still getting donations. They're still able to make speeches. They're still able to go to debates. There's no reason for them to put their their foot off the gas. There's no reason. They're making money and they're making fame. They're setting up for future political events. So there's no reason for them to drop out. The problem is that Joe Biden is hegemonic. He's the one neoliberal with name recognition. Like Buttigieg, kind of, sort of, but he keeps screwing up too. He's got a problem similar to Biden, only he happens to be not even 40 yet. But the left wing of the field, if you look at Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, and Elizabeth Warren, imagine 2 of them drop out and most of the support gravitates towards the third. They're ahead of Biden. And so they're looking at it and they're saying, we can have Bernie Sanders be the candidate. We can have Elizabeth Warren. We can have Kamala. We can have a far left candidate for the Democratic Party. They want to pull an AOC on steroids. The Jank people want to take over the Democrats and turn them into a socialist movement. In the most literal sense, they want to normalize their crazy commie ways. They don't want Joe Biden to be the candidate. Oddly enough, if I were giving them advice, like let's say I were a Marxist or something and I wanted to advise them on how to subvert the Democratic Party, let Biden get nominated. Let him get completely destroyed and get 4 more years of Trump and then spend 4 years haranguing about how evil and racist he is. And then the Democrats will crash and burn. The next midterms, they'll get wiped off the face of the earth. There will be enough stress under them then so that you'll be able to subvert the party more easily. If you try to do it now, you probably fail, because if I'm Sanders, I'm looking at him saying, I'm in second place, why would I drop out? If I'm Warren or Kamala Harris, I'm like, well, I'm arguably in third. I'm the front-running female candidate, at the very least for name recognition, for future runs, for other Senate position, gubernatorial race. There is no legitimate reason to drop out of the field. This is Biden's other major advantage other than the fact that he has the corporate cash and the name recognition. His opponents are crowded together. The far left of the field is far more crowded. Biden's main opponents right now are Buttigieg, who's running at 5 or 6%, and Hickenlooper. Those are his main opponents. And if he can knock Buttigieg out or something, he hits 40 at that point. He wins. He gets the nomination. If Hickenlooper drops out, Biden probably absorbs all of his support anyway. Just by structure. He doesn't need 50% of the parties. That's the other problem. The sharks were circling around Trump. They're like, well, Trump's weak. I might as well get in, even if I've got a 1 in a million shot, like says Gillibrand or one of these people. Even if it's the most remote of shots, I've got to say I was there. I can potentially be the Democratic nominee. I just have to play my cards right. All of them are thinking that way, but they crowded in the race so much that now it's difficult for anyone to really solidify and congeal support behind them until halfway through the primaries. This is going to cause a lot more continuous infighting in the Democrats. Ultimately, the nominee will be called on by the DNC to say, well, we're all Democrats, we're all together. We've got to focus on stopping Trump. But the ideologues won't go along with it. We saw this in 2016. It almost became a problem for the Republicans with the Never Trump thing. They were more congealed at the end of the day because Trump is simply smarter and more strategic than the average Republican. He operates more like a fairly slicked-back Democrat. The problem is the Democrats don't have such a candidate. They don't even have a John Kerry in the running. They've got Joe Biden, who's arguably weaker. They will probably lose. And so they're trying to Metoo Bernie Sanders to get him out of the way so that either Warren or Harris can become potentially the nominee. But that's for those of them that are idealistic enough. They're like, well, no more old white men for, Dem nominee, basically. They don't like Sanders for reasons other than his platform. If he were female, they would back him in an instant. That's about all. Peace out.